Defining day at NAT Terminology te. So learning Pig Latin when you're young is kind of cool. Learning it when you're a parent is essential. You have to have a way of communicating with your spouse around the kids that they can't understand you, at least until their teenage years. So in the world of NAT, Network Address Translation, it's the same way. There's this little language that Cisco developed that they use to describe the different terms. And if you don't know it, you're just going to be confused when you get into the configuration because it applies directly to the configuration. And that's going to be our aim. In this skill, we're going to look at the inside-out world of referring to NAT perspectives, or what I would more specifically say is the NAT terminology used to describe the different perspectives around. Because Cisco had this challenge. They said, okay, we need to have terms because we're talking about addresses being translated. We got these addresses in here. Let's just say 10.0.10. There's this address. What do we call that address? I mean, yes, I know, private address, right? But as we refer to NAT, I mean, it's going to become an address out here, right? And it's accessing a server out there, which could be coming back in and accessing. So we need to have these terms like, okay, what do you call it there? And what do you call it there? And when it becomes that, then what do you call it? So that's where this comes from, right? And I'm always a big like, well, why do you have to know this? The reason why is because you're going to see these terms show up when you're actually configuring NAT. So here they are. It's actually combinations of 4 words. The first one is inside. Actually, let me just get the 4 words out there. Inside, outside, local, and global. So before we combine them and I show you where these terms fit into the NAT network, I want to give you Jeremy I's definitions. Now, you're not going to find these on Cisco's website. You're not going to, if you Google them, they won't be there. But this is what makes sense for me. And when I explain it to people, I'm like, they're like, I get it. So here's Jeremy I's versions of what each one of these mean. When you're talking about inside and outside, I think of that as like, who owns that address, right? And I'm putting this in quotes because just like any kind of description, it's not perfect, but it'll make sense. So if it's inside, you own that address, right? If it's outside, someone else owns that address, right? So just kind of think that if you're taking notes, just kind of jot that down. Those first 2 words describe who owns the address. These bottom ones are really a lot simpler. I say local is essentially private and global is public. And that relates to what kind of IP address it is. So again, jot that down. Pause if you need to take a minute, jot that down, okay. So now let me talk about the terms. So when you're working in the NAT world, Cisco refers to the things that are inside your network. So let's just say you've got a computer right here, right? It's on VLAN 30, right? So it has the IP address 10.16.4.50, right? It's going to go out and access the internet, and there's a public IP address assigned right there, right? So before we go any further, we are encountering probably 3 of the 4 terms right there, right? An address on the inside of your network, right, that you own and it's private is known as an inside local address. Right? So you can think of all of these. I mean, you have other sites crossing the Metro E. They also have private addresses. Inside local. That, by far, in this picture, the vast majority of the private addresses, well, all of them, are inside local. You own them. You design them. They are under your control, right? And so maybe that'd be better than own. Owning is such a powerful word. So they're under your control, right? And they're private. Okay. So that guy goes out and accesses some server out here. Let's just say it's cbtnuggets.com, right? Which has the IP address, let's just say, of 1.2.3.4, right? A normal public internet address. Okay, whoa. What's that guy? Well, that would be owned by somebody else, right? It's CBT Nuggets. So that right there tells me it's an outside, right? And it's public, right? So outside global. And you would be absolutely right in thinking that. That's the second term. An outside global address is something outside the network, and it's public, right? It's under somebody else's control, right? So, okay, whoa, wait a sec. Right here, we have an address. Let's just say it's that 203.0.11.2 or whatever. So as you go to access the internet, you get translated from your inside local, meaning it's something you owned, it was private, right? You get translated from your inside local to, okay, what do you call that IP address? Well, you own that address. Right. And that's where I'm like, own is such a powerful word, right? Because really it's owned by the ISP, but I'm like, well, not really. The government let them, it kind of let them use it as long as they're paying the government. So that's where I'm like, ownership, you control. How about that? You control that IP address. So it's inside, it's assigned to your router. You're in control of it. All the traffic goes to and from that. And it's public, right? So inside global. And that would be accurate. That's the third term. So term number 1, term number 2, term number 3, right? Before I go on and show you the fourth term, I hate the fourth term most of all. I hate it. So these three are what comprise almost all of our network communication, right? And I think maybe I'm hoping you're starting to connect the dots on like, okay, I can see why. It's Cisco's way of, we're having a conversation and we're like, we're talking about IP address and NAT and we're like, oh, well, wait a sec. So are you talking about it before it's translated, like the inside global side? Oh, no. Okay. You're talking after it's translated, like the inside did I say inside local? So the inside global side, right? Like I think that's what they intended is like, we would all just be hanging out at a coffee shop being like, oh yeah, yesterday we had this inside global, like, it's kind of like, but it just never happened, right? So it was too unnatural. So now it's just kind of like rote memorization. We must remember these terms, right? So now let me show you the last one. Okay. So we've got outside, okay, it's someone else owns it, right? Because the combination of these terms, outside, and yet it's local. So an outside local. I know, just based on the terms that I have written right there, you might be thinking, okay, so there's a router and like behind that, it's somebody else's private IP, but no, that's actually not what it is. The outside local it's belonging to someone else, and yet it's private. The way that I think about this one, and by the way, I have only used this kind of translation once, and it was something really dumb that I shouldn't have even used it for. This is because all of these talk about the perspective from your network, right? From your network's perspective, that guy is an outside global, right? So from your network's perspective, this is someone else's IP addresses and the private version of it. So let me talk about this. You can do a type of NAT translation where you create a translation that says, okay, let's just make up a private IP address 10.16.4.100. And I say, if somebody accesses that IP address, my router will grab it and actually translate it to a public IP address out on the internet. So essentially it's it belongs to someone else. That's the outside piece of it, but it's private, right? And so that's what that describes is you can do a NAT translation where you create a private IP address inside of or it looks like it's inside of your network, right? And yet when your router receives that, it's like, oh, that's not really inside my network. It's actually out there. So it's almost like you're spoofing somebody else's IP address out in the outside world. So that's the fourth term. It's called an outside local address. It's a private IP address that actually translates to something that belongs to somebody else, right? So, review, and we'll wrap it up. 4 terms: inside local, addresses inside of your network that are managed by you that are private, right? Inside global, that's usually the address that's assigned right to the public interface of your router because it's owned by you or managed by you, but it's public, so it's the public side of your router. Outside global, that's the one out here on the, I could dance or I could point at you. So outside global, that's the one that it is belonging to somebody else and it's public. So those are the ones on the rest of the internet. And then the really weird one, outside local, a private IP address that actually translates out to something that belongs to somebody else. Those are the terms. I'm going to wipe this. Those are the terms that we use to describe the various places of NAT translations and what the address is at different points in the network. We're going to use that in the next video when we get into the configuration. For now, we've learned the inside-out world of referring to NAT perspectives. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.